Good morning. Very excited to be here. Thank you, Brand Innovators, for always having those amazing opportunities for us to discuss very important topics for the industry. And particularly, I want to thank Jason and Cynthia for always taking care of the West Coast community so well. So thank you so much. I lead media at Rivian, American EV manufacturer, and I'm very excited for the topic today because at Rivian we really believe in communities. If you have been to one of our spaces, you're going to see that we spend our mindset and our efforts in really creating opportunities for people to be connected. It's just not walking into a dealership. It is actually an opportunity for you to build your community and engage in multiple events. So I'm very, very excited to talk to marketers and partners in the industry that contribute for us to help build amazing ecosystems for communities and breakthrough and cultural moments. Let's start with introductions first. Josh, you want to get started?
Great. Thank you all for having me. I'm Josh, co-founder of Ideally. Ethos of Ideally is really connecting brand marketers with their audience so that they can co-create from the very early stages of ideation. What that means practically is you're able to test your creative and your comms, and that is overlaid on top of your category, so you can really understand if you're meeting the needs of your consumers. And that also helps for this topic, making sure that you can tap into those trends and cultural moments.
Great. Hi, I'm Nilofer Vahora. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Amika. Amika is a Brooklyn-born salon professional hair care brand. We, not many people know this, but Amika means friend, and we approach hair care, professional hair care, in that way in everything we do. So our ethos is to bring joy to professional hair care through radical self-expression, inclusivity, and really being an inclusive environment for where we believe that all hair and humans are equal.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ryan Spicer. I am the Chief Revenue Officer of Atmosphere TV. We are a television entertainment company that was founded on the premise to fix the fact that no one ever walked into a bar, a restaurant, or a gym and asked to watch daytime television. So we rebuilt television entertainment for the purposes of watching it, or for the moments of when you watch it outside of your living room couch, right? So in other words, other places of community.
Awesome. And to get started, one question that I have, I'd love to get the different perspectives of what is, in your opinion, the difference between an audience and a true community. How do you distinguish that?
You guys want to go first?
I could start. So in my mind, I love this question, by the way. I think, an audience listens, they're passive, a community participates. And what that looks like is, whether they are, for us, whether it's our stylists who come to our annual Camp Amika and are teaching each other how to style hair, or to learn the tricks of the trade, or it's a consumer who is, doing their hair and posting a UGC about it online. There's a participation, there's an active conversation with the brand, and that to me is, the distinction.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add, I completely agree. One, love the question, and two, similar themes. The one thing I'd add on to that participation is that in a community, there's commonalities as well, right? There's shared things when you're a part of a community that you feel that, bring similarities, whether it's of interest or of experience, or of just time and place of where you are. An audience can be much more disparate and just happens to be maybe watching or viewing at the same time without any other type of commonalities.
Took the words right out of my mouth, so we're aligned.
Yeah,
you get to go first next time.
And earlier this week, I was in a conversation with another colleague in the media industry, and we were talking about all these viral trends, like everything. Certain industries really depend on those really short moments, viral moments. But what is, Nilofer, I would love to have your perspective first on how do you distinguish from a trend or from a meaningful moment that's worth an investment from the brand to really lean towards from a cultural perspective?
Yeah, it's interesting because the two do get blend together, particularly when you're in a consumer product or when people are using your products. But hair is really emotional. It is an expression of self-expression. We were just talking about this earlier, where I said there is. If you have a bad hair day, your whole day is not good.
I know the feeling.
Yeah, and but if you apply makeup the wrong way, if I woke up this morning and I did something, and I was like, oh, okay, that eyeliner doesn't work, I can wash it off. You have to wash your whole hair. You have to do. There's so much you have to do, and you can go through the day feeling not great about yourself. But there's also this really deep kind of cultural significance of people's hair stories. And so what we really look for is that connection, that, those moments when we can invest where it not just aligns to that emotional connection that people feel with the brand, but it also really aligns back to how they are feeling and how they are expressing themselves. If it's, so yeah, I mean, there's those moments. And obviously we will, we want to see the two connected, right? There are moments in time where trends are aligned, hair cycling or oiling or we call soul food Sundays when people are using our soul food masks to have that kind of moment of, their wash day, making their wash day special. Those moments can align back to trends and opportunities, but it's really where we invest is that sweet spot.
Yeah, and so talking about that, I want to direct a question to Josh about measurement. How do you measure then those? How do you analyze the impact of your marketing activities picking up on those cultural moments and those opportunities?
Yeah, I'll come to that question in a second. I think I just want to quickly add to your point. Trends are great, but not every brand needs to jump on a trend. It's only good to jump on that trend if it links with your DNA as a brand. And I think, sorry to anyone that's from Pepsi in the room, but you probably would have remembered in 2017 with Kendall Jenner, and there was a real social activism moment happening culturally. They jumped on that, but they hadn't shown up in that way consistently up until that point, and so it didn't come across as authentic. And I know the previous panelist doesn't like that word, but I think it is core to being a part of those cultural movements. And so they ended up pulling that ad within 24 hours. To your point on measurement, there's different ways that you can track this, and it depends if you're wanting to go down the qualitative or quantitative. I think especially around the cultural element, you want to be tapping into those creator communities, understanding the conversations that are happening behind the scenes, and then feeding that into how your brand is showing up. There are more hard metrics in the quantitative piece, but we can probably touch on that later.
Yeah, and Ryan, this question is for you because you work in a very interesting environment in that intersection between.
Do you mean our office? Come on down.
No, your medium is, I would say, in between CTV and out of home, right? Is a collective experience of watching a content, and that's also hard to measure. But there is something special about it. What do you think it's unique about the collective viewership experience that creates those cultural moments?
Yeah, really poignant question. I think you put perfectly the space that we sit in. And I'll tell you, this is something we actively talk with marketers about every day, is pinpointing that, because it is a little ephemeral. But I'll go back. Doug Zarkin, who's a good friend, he was the Take 5 CMO, was on the stage yesterday, and he was talking about a moment bringing his daughter to college, and it was his, she's down at GW where he went to school, and he's like, I look at her and all of the rest of them, and they walk around like this, right? And that's a very common experience for all of us. And he's like, I just remember I always walked around with my head up. And it drew a parallel. I'm getting there. But where we exist is this place to bring people's heads up, and a place that instigates, going back to that question of community and discussion and discourse, right? We sit at a place where people watch entertainment, and it sparks a conversation and an opportunity to go, oh, Julie, did you see it? Holy crap, or did you think about that, right? When you are with people, it's the opportunity to spark a conversation, to take something that otherwise might be internalized on your own, but to initiate a conversation or a dialogue in some way is so much more likely to happen in that capacity. So we love thinking about moments that are super contextually relevant, because again, you meet context, higher relevance, that's going to spark a conversation. But just even that opportunity for people, it's a differentiated time than when you happen to be sitting back on your couch or sitting by yourself watching your phone. So we love that aspect of community, right? And leaning into the opportunity that where people are experiencing our content, our entertainment, is a place where they're more likely to be actively engaged with other people around them.
Yeah, and to create those very meaningful moments, you need a lot of intention. There is a lot of insight. So I'd love to hear from your perspective. How do you translate, how do you pick up those insights and convert them in meaningful moments for brands, for your brand or for brands you work with, and make that really breakthrough?
Yeah, so it's a good question because there are soft and hard metrics that you can play with here. But what I would say is back to the community piece and picking up those nuances through creator communities, etc. Take those and then test those through quantitative measures so you can track them over a period of time. You know, the way that brands are successful in this space is they see the emergence before it becomes mainstream, and so able to do that through quantitative measures to track, you know, the awareness of that topic or that conversation that's being had is a great place to start.
Yeah, and Nilofer, do you want to tell us how you do that with Amika? And
yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I think, you know, to Josh's point, it is kind of soft and hard, right? I mean, on the soft side, we are constant conversation with our stylist community. It's whether our field team is out there, our education teams. We have a stylist collective who are a group of professional stylists that who are very influential in the stylist community, and so we're constant conversation with them. And we heard from them, for example, that there was really a dearth of kind of training and education that they don't even get in cosmetology schools on how to style textured hair. And so we worked with one of our stylist community members to create an education curriculum on styling textured hair. And so that we listen actively to our community, but then we also do that quantitatively. So we are tracking share of voice. We are constantly social listening. We will look and see what that'll help us to. We are working with trend agencies to understand what's kind of happening in trend, and then we have a very, very active, engaged internal community who are constantly finger on the pulse and and seeing and testing and learning, and we give them the opportunity to take those risks.
And even with all thoughtful process, sometimes I think Josh already teased a little bit about it, but I'd love to further hear from you. Sometimes things get out of control and you come up with this very thoughtful approach, but something else happens and the community takes it differently. How do you manage when something backfires for your community? What is important to watch out, and how do you control and regain that trust?
I love this question because we almost see it happen weekly at the moment. Pause. Don't respond straight away. You need to take in all of the information. We quite often get told we need to react or we need to put something out to correct or course correct, but that's not the case. Also, who is reacting? Are they your audience? We've seen Sydney Sweeney. That was very polarizing. But again, depends who you're trying to target. So my advice is always to pause, assess the situation, understand who's reacting, and then take next steps.
Just even piggybacking off your point with with the obviously the American Eagle example, they're at least outwardly, and credit to them, there wasn't a sense of panic, right? And there was a sense of going back to their goal, and their objective was to sell jeans. I mean, there's a lot of campaigns, there's a lot of activations that go into market, look good, generate buzz, and don't impact the bottom line for a brand in one way or another. And they knew what they were doing and continue to forge through, I think, in a respectful way and listening, but knowing that they believed that what they were doing was, did not have an ill intent and was ultimately impacting the bottom line for their business in a positive way, too. I mean, when you would think, your first reaction would be like, to go into crisis mode, shut it down, they had some courage to your point, approach it with some patience.
I would say it's super important to listen first, and echoing those thoughts. But it's you have a community; they're really invested in the brand. Our customers we have the highest loyalty and NPS in the hair care industry, and so it's super important for us to maintain that advocacy and loyalty and dialogue with our community. So it's really important to listen, and then and you have to assess whether it something aligns to your values as a brand or not. And sometimes, I think brands can miss the mark. And even if it is something that, is going to address the bottom line, or it's like, oh, we hit the sales, like you have to take a pause and say, like, does this align to what, who we stand for and who our community sees us as? And I think in this world today, a brand can have like a certain statement or a value statement internally, but that mic is in the hands of the consumer. And so they are also an active participant in establishing and creating who your brand is and advocating that to the world. And so if they're saying something about your brand that is not what you're saying about your brand, you've got a real big problem there. And so I think that some brands don't necessarily understand that when they're like, oh, Wall Street rewarded us, we got the sales, but ultimately, like, is your community standing with you through that moment? And I think it's really interesting when it's happened to me in the past. It's like sometimes, you might get like someone who's not your community or not your audience, like commenting, but then the community will step in. And it's fascinating to see how they'll be like, no, you got it wrong. Like, this is what they're really doing. Like, this is what, what they really stand for. And you don't even have to, sometimes the best situation is when the brand doesn't even have to comment, when the people who are in your community are going to speak on your behalf, and that's when that you've got that connection.
Yeah, and I think this gets very tricky and challenging as the brand grows, right? When you are still a niche, a very focused brand, you find that audience and you cultivate it, and then you hit the masses, and then you have lots of different customers, and they have different perspectives. Brian, do you have any case, or do you remember any brand you work with, any of your clients that had to navigate staying true to who they were and serving their communities, or any of you, if you want to share a case, that they had to balance between really like maintaining their core DNA and being with their advocates while expanding to new audiences?
As you were talking, I was actually thinking that might be something you were going through as Rivian as well.
Yeah, that's right. This is why I'm asking. I need advice from my colleagues here.
Well, I think, I don't necessarily have a specific case study, but I think that there's, certainly those moments where, it's an opportunity for the brand to lean in more to brand awareness, to equity, and establishing that equity. I think too many, brands, particularly like they're owned by boards, or they have to answer to people who want to see short-term results, and so they really have to focus on those bottom funnel kind of KPIs and metrics, and and that'll tell you, well, you're not going to see that ROI of a brand equity campaign or putting out there who you are, but you have to have that constant like layer back up to who you are and what that brand equity is, because otherwise you will lose control of that. And I think for me, I have seen that work, where if you're constantly reinforcing, even in your product campaigns, who you are, and it ties back to that brand equity, then there won't be a question of whether that's misaligned.
I'd like to jump in there. I'll give a little bit of context, because this brand is owned by an American company called Hanes. You're probably familiar with the underwear brand. Their sub-brand is Bonds. They're Australian. They went through a process of how do we get cut through in the US, but stay true to who we are as a brand. So to find that authenticity, they co-created their campaign, which I'll touch on in a second, with their internal brand teams in hand with their consumer. And they iterated on a weekly basis to get the end product that they did. What I love about this, where I'm getting to, is I don't know if you're familiar with the Irwin family, Steve Irwin, Robert Irwin. Cool. Okay, we've got some fans in the room. That's really nostalgic for Australians, and people very much connect to the Irwin family. Bonds took that and they were like, internally, we want to use Robert Irwin, who everybody knows is a sweetheart, who was once 8 years old and everyone knows him as a kid. They were like, we want to put him in his underwear and we want to have him on the campaign and we're going to make waves. That's a bold thing to do because of the nostalgia within the country and then the exporting through to America. But they thought, okay, let's actually test that as well as that hunch that we had. Being able to co-create with their consumer, get the confidence. They took that bold idea and they got 9 billion views within 24 hours on that campaign. I probably was a large contributor to that. Okay, sorry guys, that was a bad joke. But I don't know if you've seen it, but yeah, it really blew up. So I think that's a great way where they stayed authentic, but they tapped into a cultural moment and they brought that to a new country and localized it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I work, sharing also one case, I worked many years in the entertainment industry and worked with very beloved IPs. One of them, I believe everyone knows here, Lord of the Rings. And when we develop a series at Amazon, it was very challenging because you really want to make sure you maintain that Tolkien fandom while we expand the brand. A lot of work we had to take in consideration, and a lot of small steps, which is sometimes challenging, right? Because your core fans are dying to know more, they're anxious, and you need to go on droplets, like very slow, to ensure you're not taking any miscalculated risk. We're approaching kind of the end of the panel, and I think for this last segment, I would really love to get your advice for brands that are trying to navigate cultural moments and really breaking through. And I do want to start back to that collective experience. What is very important when you're developing creative for the very relevant cultural moment, when you know there is multiple people simultaneously consuming that experience?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you've heard a number of brands talk about personalization at scale, right? The world that we live in now is wanting to reach a consumer in a very meaningful way that's particular to them. I think you have to keep in mind a couple things. One is, Aaron and Casey before us talked a lot about the consumers have these. I mean, obviously it's overgeneralized, but so many different touch points that they can interact with a brand. They interact with content in different ways. Ironically, one thing that they did with us recently, Aaron was talking about the food brands, and Unilever participates, and Hellmann's particularly in the food space. It's remember the platform and the place where you are showing up, and be relevant to that place. They have recently have something live with us right now, where Hellmann's is triggering a specific ad. Their sort of tagline right now is Hail Mayo, and so whenever there is a Hail Mary and where atmosphere is being watched, likely where sports games are happening as well, we're live triggering a Hail Mayo relevant spot, right? It's like it's leaning into that moment that not only one person's going to see, but multiple people will see, and it can cause some type of dialogue. Ultimately, what I'm saying is find something that is relevant to the place and the moment where people are watching. It's different, whether you're sitting at your home, whether you're out in a physical environment, whether you're scrolling through a social media feed. So think about what that moment is and tailor it to that particular moment. Sometimes you're going to be tailoring an ad to when someone's just going to experience themselves. Other places you need to think about, I'm going to tailor something that's going to evoke types of conversation or community or people engaging in dialogue in some form or another.
Here you go. Let's keep
I love that example. I love what Hellmann's is doing too right now. It's really clever. I would say, I think that the question is an interesting one because not everyone has the money to kind of do massive broadcast type campaigns at, public sports venues or something.
But I think cost that much.
Yeah, I know. But it is kind of really interesting. So I have 2 points to make. One that is, before you broadcast, really listen and think about what's relevant to your community. Not every trend is going to work, but something that we do a lot is we clinically test. When we say all hair is welcome, we truly embed that within the brand in every aspect. So we clinically test all of our products for all textures, styles, and hair types, and we have an internal curly coily committee who are really kind of the conscience of the brand, and they are testing and bringing ideas, and not only to product development but also on brand marketing. And it's really interesting to kind of get that internal community to be thinking about what's relevant for the external community. And I think that's an easy way for brands to really kind of lean in and not think about it as just kind of like, oh my gosh, there's so much out there, what could we do? It's really listening to, because everybody has their own hair story, that they can bring to the table. Something that's relevant here is that I completely agree when you're doing out of home or something, like to be be relevant and think about, the space. I remember, we actually just ran out of home, actually cinema advertising with Amika in the UK market. I've done that at prior brands before, and it's actually not that expensive, but you have this captive audience who is sitting in the cinema seats, waiting for the trailers to start, waiting for the movie to start, and you have that, their eyeballs. When do you get that, with people where they have that captive audience and they're listening, watching? Even when they're watching TV, they're usually on the phones, but in the cinema, they're there, they're ready to go. And so we ran a brand equity campaign that we had run here, and it was a 30-second ad that, we have this song that we had recorded with a recording artist, it's Amika, and it just repeated, except it was a 60-second spot. So it ran for 60 seconds. And so it became a meme in the UK market, and it's all over social media where people are like, oh my God, slightly annoying, but now I remember the brand. And we saw a 20% lift in that market across all retailers, over the weekend, because it was so memorable and we got that captive audience in that moment. But it was also that that moment of just kind of leaning into, okay, slightly annoying, but still, you remember the brand now. But it told the message, and you just kind of have to tailor your message. In that moment, it worked, right? And it was people being like, oh my God, I love the brand. And then it just kind of, the social commentary, really flooded from there, where it might have started with people being like, does anyone know this? Like, why did it go on for so long? To, I love it, it's amazing, please get it, I love this product. And that conversation started and sparked.
That's awesome. And Josh, your final remarks, please?
Yeah, no, I completely agree on listening before broadcasting. And I think to earn that cultural relevance, it's really about listening, being humble, like humility, and also consistent participation. I think that last piece is key. So, all brand teams in the room, including probably my head of marketing, we have a constant conversation of investment into consistent participation, but that is a real unlock for community and connecting your brand into the cultural relevance. So listen before you broadcast, and consistent participation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Since you already share that you're going to have your media kit available, you share your product, I'm going to say go to one of our spaces and demo drive our products. They're awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for the session, and it's lovely.